All right, welcome to another episode of Charles Weekly Party. I'm Charles, your host, and before we get started, let's roll the intro. All right, so for those of you who are listening and not trying to watch this on YouTube, you are getting the full experience today. And by full experience, I mean I am only audio recording this. I am not video recording today. Unfortunately, things haven't gone exactly according to plan today. So here we are. I'm not necessarily thrilled with the way events are turning out, but I do have to acknowledge the fact that this is where we are, and this is what I'm going to have to do. So, today, I do want to talk about a couple of things. I think personally, I'm gonna end up leaning a little bit more towards the technology side of this rather than the architecture side, only because what I'm looking at today, I haven't necessarily done as much prep work as I really prefer, and as much as I normally do have. But still, I'm going to try and give you the best that I can, because that's, realistically speaking, all I can do. So today, I'm talking about the house on Muntanya Street. Now, what really got my attention about this house, and before I get too far, it's located in Girona, Spain, and the architects are Sau Taller de Arquitectura. I am probably mispronouncing that because I have not taken Spanish, so I do not know how to say that properly. But what really struck me when I first saw an image of this house, it just looked, I guess the word would be sort of normal. Well, not perfectly normal, but it seemed like there wasn't any trickery in place. It looked like the picture in front of me was really all that there was to see. And even better yet, the first picture that I saw wasn't even the front of the house, it's the back. Because I guess that's actually, after looking at it, that's the side that really has the most detail for it. And that's a deliberate move. And one of the things of meanings in architecture is by having sort of the nicest looking face of the house facing the back. What the first thing that's sort of conveying as a message to me is this house is most specifically for the people who are living inside of it or visiting it. This isn't a house for you just to pass by. If you do that, you're not getting the full experience. You have to see it you have to be invited as a guest to get the full experience. And I think that really sort of separates the public and private. And to some degree, I think it's, looking at the floor plans, that's sort of how the house does it properly. The first thing I want to mention, looking at the house just in pictures, you wouldn't necessarily figure anything special. But here's where the sections and the plans really come into use. So in the section, it becomes very quickly apparent that the house is not a perfect rectangle as the pictures that you see would have you believe. And by rectangle, I mean it's sort of like the front has a flat face to it. The back, with the more interesting detail, has what it looks like a small little staircase of 3 steps. And just looking at it in depth, you see that, and here's where these section views are really good. You can see pretty quickly that the outside of the house is really a deception for what's actually inside. I mean, looking inside, everything, when you look at the section, you can tell instead of rectangles, this is actually a house of a parallelogram. And unless you were sitting there looking at it in person, able to move around, you wouldn't pick that up without the plans and sections. But I digress. The first floor has a little bit more of a generic living space. That's what connects to. That's where you have the kitchen and whatnot, and that provides the connection to the backyard with a little bit of a patio, a little bit of green space, and a pool and a poolside patio. And I guess, interestingly enough, I have worked with parallelograms before. What throws me off about it, and this I got from just looking at the first floor plan, or the ground floor plan, I guess you could say. The swimming pool is a rectangle, and it's parallel with, the sides of it are parallel with the long sides of the backyard. So this whole house and backyard is basically one elongated parallelogram. So I'm trying to figure out the best way. I'd say the short sides are about 1/3 of the length of the long sides of it. Actually, I'd even go further. I'd say that that's 1/4. And taking that into account, it's 4 times as long as it is wide. And somehow, looking at it this way, everything just feels, feels a little bit separated, but very deliberately separated. But once again, the more I look at this, the more it stands out to me that some things were deliberately not placed the same way as everything else. And I really just can't put my mind on it about why you would take and have the patio be a rectangle, or the pool and patio be rectangles, while the rest of the yard is the same trapezoid with the same angles as the house is. And then inside the house, the staircase is perpendicular to the front of the house. It's not perpendicular to the rectangle of the pool. It's different in a different way. So, putting my mind on that is a little bit trickier, but I will say it's in line with the way the dining room furniture is really arranged. So I think that gives it a little bit of character, I guess you could say. Trying to find the right word. Connection. Definitely provides a reasonable connection to those other elements. And realistically, you can't easily get a trapezoidal picnic table. It's possible, but not as easy. And the other thing, level-wise in this house, there are not... I guess the best way to put it is it has basically 3 levels. But from one side you see 3 levels, from another side you see 2. If you're talking about the actual elevation of ground areas, it is what's the word? With respect to elevations or levels, on the elevation there are 5 different levels, but the tallest point of the house is 3 stories. The ground floor connects everything, and then the front and the back of the house alternate between where the floor line is, so it's basically centered. So you can walk underneath the garage, no problem, and there's space under there. It easily, unless you see the backyard, you'd think that this is a 2-story house. But enough about the couple of things that are just keeping me entertained, because my goal here is to try and keep you guys entertained too. And just looking at how rectangles and parallelograms interact with each other isn't necessarily going to do a heck of a lot of good. But what I do need to talk about, and what I really do value on this site, is how nice everything is really put together. So, for starters, the materiality of it is really nice, right? From what I read, most of this is supposed to be unfinished. So on the exterior material, so the concrete is left as is, and the paneling was left as is, so that it has a more natural feel to it, and that the color tone of the concrete really blends well with the house right next to it. And I think that's pretty amazing, how it looks so different, yet so it feels like it sort of belongs there. And the front of it is really really a red herring. Not almost, it is. Because you look at it from this view, from the view of the front, you see a discrete garage, you see a front door, and above that you see a line then different material for the second floor. So if you didn't know any better, you think that this house has 2 floors, when in fact it has what are really 5 different levels. And the way that's brought together is by an alternating staircase. So each staircase landing is in reality what's the word for it? Each landing is a floor. So, but that's not everything. The garage is special, or different from every other room in this entire place. And the reason for that is purely because that is the only room in this house that doesn't get daylight. So for all of you daylight lovers out there, this house has plenty of it. The dining room table, you got plenty of daylight, plenty of views. Every single room, the bedrooms, the living rooms, everything. Even I think even the bathrooms have access to daylight, although not a huge window to be able to see in or out, but just basic daylight access. And then in the back of the house, each of those 3 levels has outdoor access. So there's basically an enclosed roof portion on the, should I call it the 3rd floor? Facing the back, it's the 3rd floor. So you have a nice 3rd floor there with a roof. The 2nd floor has a little bit of a covered balcony, so if it's raining, you can stand under there and enjoy watching the rain if that entertains you. And on the 1st floor, you have a little bit of furniture and backyard access to make the most out of the kind of pretty backyard. Now, I guess what sort of catches my eyes the most on this is how it takes a couple of different challenges that you could have and really turns it into something. So most people think to have a front porch in your standard cookie cutter home, and this house sort of does away with that. It makes full advantage of the levels that it has. And by sort of splitting the house in 2, well, it makes the most of it, so it feels like each floor is well connected. You go up, you're on a different floor. And that also sort of contributes to the fact that nothing ever feels really far away. Because you just climb up a few stairs and you're on the next level. Climb up a few more stairs, you're on another level. And each level has different views and different purposes. All of the enjoyable and sort of private spaces are facing the backyard, or in that back portion. And the parts that sort of connect to the rest of the world are all facing the front. So, just some thoughts. Now, as much as I'd like to continue talking about this, and there are plenty of other things for me to talk about, I do want to shift to quite a few technology bits and pieces that really caught my attention this week. The first one that really caught my attention and threw me off was a bug with razor mice. So the basics of this bug are that you take the mouse, you plug it in. Whenever you do that on a Windows computer, Windows Update tries to grab as quickly as possible the drivers for it off the internet, or off of its servers on the internet, because there is so much hardware for PCs that the operating system would take up an incomprehensible amount of room if you put every single driver for every single piece of equipment that anyone could ever plug into a computer on it. So, like, for most people, you wouldn't by default be using a floppy disk reader. And for the few people that do, well, when you plug it in, Microsoft will pull the drivers using Windows Update. But the problem with the Razer mouse bug that they're working pretty hard to try and figure out is that when you plug in the mouse, it allows access to system privileges during the driver retrieval process. And for those of you who aren't tech savvy, that basically means you have unlimited power to run stuff. So unlimited power to do all that means you could, if someone wanted to do something malicious, they plug in one of these mice, they can do whatever the heck they want to your computer, assuming they have physical access. So on the upside, you don't have to worry about this bug being something that could affect you if nobody's around. So if someone wants to use this bug to do something malicious, they do need physical access to a device. But don't worry too much, I should say, because you should always be security conscious of computers, and a little bit of worry goes a long way in trying to keep yourself safe. But it's not something that, if someone wants to use it against you, they'd have to get to your computer and they'd have to plug the mouse in. And they'd also have to know a couple of things about computers too. Because otherwise, it does provide access, but it's not a permanent access path. So it provides a time frame, but it has to be used effectively. So next, in terms of power to do stuff, Microsoft's Power Apps got hacked. And I'm wincing as I say this. This really would have been a good week to have working video, because just saying this made me wince. Because right now, Microsoft is facing the what's the word for it? The theft of quite a lot of information, and I think for 30 million people, their social security numbers, vaccination status, home addresses. There's more information that was leaked, but just that stuff right off the top, that's not a heck of a lot. Or that isn't a long list, but that's a lot of damage, because if you think about it, your social security number is super important, and someone can do a lot with it if they have it. So that's a pretty darn big disaster. As per usual with data breaches, yeah, it's not good, but it is what it is. You can't unhack something, and hopefully, as long as you keep an eye on your stuff, you should be good. I don't know off the top of my head what the plan is about notifying or whatnot about people who are affected, but I know the general law regarding a breach of certain personal information, and social security numbers is certainly personal information. Any type of breach that includes that sort of information requires the person who got hacked, or the company who got hacked, to pay for identity theft monitoring or protection for all of the people who are affected. And that was noise. We'll see. So, yeah, usually with this type of breach, the company who got hacked has to pay certain amount of money in order to provide protection for the people who are actually involved in the data breach. Now, last but not least, and this one made me a little bit happier. So I know I just talked about all the bad news about the Razer mouse bug and the Power Apps, but and for clarification, the Power Apps hack affected quite a few 38 million records became available online, and that did include a little bit of that included Microsoft, JB Hunt, American Airlines, and even some governmental customers were affected by this. And the biggest problem was that the Power Apps in that case were misconfigured, which created security risks. So, we'll see. And the big little problem here was that the little key, it's almost something I want to laugh at. But the problem was that the default settings for Power Apps left data accessible to anyone. And that was a very slight oops with big consequences. But I need to talk about the good news and get so that we can finish off this episode on a happy note. I know we started it on a happy note with the beautiful house, and I'm going to finish it on some good news from Microsoft regarding Windows 11. So if anyone hasn't heard the good news, here it is. So upon further review, Microsoft has decided that some Intel 7th generation processors will be supported by Windows 11 natively. And I don't think it's a long list, but there are a few of them that are going to be accessible, that are going to be able to install Windows 11. But with that, even if I know the big thing people were looking for was for, what's the name for it? AMD Ryzen first generation processors that were released in 2017, only 4 years ago. They won't be officially supported by Microsoft for Windows 11. It's sad, but that's just the way things seem to be working out. The piece of really good news, because there are only some specific 7th generation processors that they will be supporting. It's not all Intel 7th generations. But the really good news is that Microsoft has removed the installation blocks for a fresh install of Windows 11, with the caveat that it may not, if you do that, it's not going to make for as nice of an experience as it would for something that is easily upgradable to Windows 11 in that they're intending it for. So what that means is it is very specific on fresh install, and it sort of makes sense with them doing that because there are loopholes that exist to make or to be able to install Windows 11 betas on non-supported hardware. So making a couple of tweaks and you're good. What does that mean for the average consumer? Well, not a heck of a lot. So it has some good things and it has some bad things. Right? Well, no bad things. But all it means is if you really want Windows 11 on older hardware, you can do it. You just need a fresh install and you're good. You can pull it off. They're fine with that. And to some degree, it comes down to occasionally people realize that mistakes are going to happen. Not everything's going to be perfect. And in this case, there were multiple ways of getting around the thing that checked to make sure that you had all of the proper hardware for Windows 11. So all Microsoft really did was say, okay, there's a way of doing this. We're not going to go and cause you a lot of trouble to be able to do it. So we'll let you do it, but don't yell at us if it doesn't work as well as you'd like it to. Because there are a lot of behind-the-scenes changes that have gone on with Windows 11, and it's pretty unbelievable. And according to Microsoft, the way they're doing it, everything's going to be a little bit, but everything should be significantly more secure. So that's going to conclude the episode for today. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And hopefully next week things will be a little bit more ironed out and I'll be able to give you the quality of episode you deserve. I know I can hear the audio and the echo in the background. It's sort of bugging me. So my part 2 for the week is play it safe. Always remember that you do have there's a certain amount of trust you place into companies with data, and to be cautious with that. So don't just hand over your social security number, and keep an eye on your credit stuff to make sure that you don't have anything new that you haven't done before. So if you're truly concerned, I can always say that it's a good idea to get identity theft monitoring. There are companies that offer it. So using something like that can help give you peace of mind if you're a little bit more concerned. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And I promise this may not have been the perfect representation of what a normal week is, but I think there are some things I did today differently that I do plan on adopting in the future. So if you want to see that, you have to subscribe so you don't miss when I bring these cute little tweaks in play. So if you go to anchor.fm/CharlesWeeklyParty, you can listen, and there are links to all of your favorite podcasting locations, but that's not it. That's not all you can do there. You can also interact with the podcast by leaving a voice message. And you can even support the podcast if you choose to. Because unfortunately, it isn't free to produce. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a review. And most of the time you can see the action on YouTube. Today's not most of the time. So there will be a YouTube release, but it won't be a video of me talking. So that's all for today. Take care and roll that outro. See you next time.